In this video, we're going to glue up the panel for our 13 1/4 by 13 1/4 inch square, which will eventually get turned into our cribbage board. So I've got the raw material sitting in front of me. Here's an example of what you'll have after you've gone through this process. So it starts off with raw material, as I said, and we want to get lengths of material that are 14 inches long by 14 inches wide. There's not too many wide boards at 14 inches in our materials shed, so we're going to need to do a glue up for that. This pine board that I've grabbed for today is a little over 8.5 inches wide. By my Superior High School math, 2 of those boards side by side will be bigger than 14 inches. Now, because we're working with natural material, if 2 widths of your material doesn't add up to 14, which is the rough size we're going for today, you may need to add a third or a fourth or a fifth piece of material to get that required width. If you have any questions, see your instructor. So I'm just going to mark out some rough sizes here. I'm stretching my tape from this end. I'm going to make a mark at 14. 14 plus 14 is 28. So I'll make my second cut there. Just be aware that, again, we're working with natural materials. So if you had a board like this, where there's a big knot inclusion on one side, you may choose to cut off a couple of inches before you start measuring out your 14-inch increments. Now we're off to the miter saw. I've made my cuts, I've stored my extra material back on the wood shelf, so now I'm ready to start thinking about how these boards will come together. I noticed on one of my boards I had a large knot, so I want to put that to the outside edge because when this is cut into a circle, I think that's going to turn into scrap. Now if there's a piece you want to make sure you keep, maybe you like large knots, we might put those towards the center. So now, so I don't get confused between here and the jointer, which is going to be my next tool, where I'll make 2 straight lines to help glue these together. Okay, I'm going to take my pencil and just draw an arrow pointing towards the edges that need to get jointed. I'm not going to worry about these outside edges today, because they'll get cut off in future processes. Well, I'm back for the jointer, and I've got 2 smooth edges that should produce a nice clean wood joint. Now, if you're wondering why I haven't planed this board down yet, it's because A, it's relatively flat, and B, after I glue it together, I'll have glue squeeze out in this center joint. The boards may shift and not lie totally aligned with one another. So I'm going to wait until the glue is dry. We will plane it down in a future video. So what I want to do now is just set my boards out and confirm they meet up with each other and they're flat. If there's any issues now, it's not going to get better with glue and clamps. It would be best if you identify an issue with this fit to go back to the jointer, try jointing again and see if that fixes your problem. If not, come find your instructor and they can help you with this. I'm happy with what I've got going on here, so I'm going to grab 2 clamps. I always like to grab 2 clamps that look the same. If you've got the same style of clamp, it's going to sit flatter and work better for you as you go through this process. And I also want to get a bottle of wood glue off of our clamping card. So I always like to do a little bit of practice with my clamps, a rehearsal before I get the glue on. So the first thing I'll do is I'll crank this squeaky handle back so that all the threads are on the outside of the job. That'll give me about 2 to 3 inches of travel as I go to turn this handle and tighten it down. Then when I set the clamps out, I'm going to set them on the table so that the handle is hanging off the edge of the table. That'll make it easy for me to tighten and put that extra pressure on there. To open this particular pair of clamps up, I'm going to squeeze these bars down here against the bottom jaw, and I should be able to slide it back and forth. Sometimes you'll get big gobbers of glue on here that'll keep it from sliding. If that's the case, you can squeeze the bars against the jaw, give it a light tap on the floor, and the mass of the bottom jaw will usually break that glue loose. So here comes the dress rehearsal part. I'm going to set one board in the clamp. I'll take my next board and set it in here. And then I'm just going to make sure that I slide these jaws shut. My project should still stay relatively flat, and that I can turn these handles to put pressure on it without my project popping out of the clamp or shifting or doing something unexpected on me. So far, so good. So I'm going to loosen these jaws one more time, and we're going to put a bead of wood glue on here. So this bead of glue can be fairly generous. If glue spills today, we'll clean it up tomorrow when we put the project through the planer. So I'm going to put a bead of glue down each side of the board here just to ensure I've got good coverage. Then I'll line that arrow up that I made earlier, so my two arrows are pointing. I know this is aligned the right way. And then finally, I'm just going to slide my boards back and forth. What that's doing for me is spreading my glue out so that I've got the whole side covered with glue. So I'll put it back in here, line everything up, make sure it feels flat, and I will start to crank these down. And I'm just going to continue to tighten here until I can feel the pressure building up. The other thing that I'm looking for is I'm getting some glue squeeze out on the top of my project. So that tells me it's forcing it together, that glue's coming out. And if I look at the bottom of my project, I've got glue dripping out of the joint here. It's actually puddling up on the table in front of me. That's just fine. That's what this gluing table is here for. Now, since nobody's coming along behind me, I'm going to let my project grip here. Hopefully the glue will solidify before it gets moved. But I know at some point, somebody's going to need to glue up here. So I'm going to take my marker or my pencil, and I'll take and put my name on here big and bold so there's no mistaking whose project it is. And then I'm going to let it sit in the clamps for at least an hour. And that's 60 minutes. That's longer than you're in class for each day. So you will likely come back tomorrow and pull this out of the clamp. And so good luck with that step. I look forward to seeing your progress.